Thanks all for being on just a minute early. It's really helpful. So I'm going to give folks the extra minute or two to get on, but thanks for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. How's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Awesome.
How are you, Councilman?
Hey, I'm great. How are you, Brittany?
Good, thank you.
Hi, Zeke. How are you?
Hey, Donna. What's happening?
Glad you're home. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
All right. So it is 5:31. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, Tisha, Director Edwards, my co-chair, got pulled. She's got a big thing with the mayor tomorrow. So she got pulled into a prep. But nonetheless, I am super excited for another edition of the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Care Task Force. In tonight's meeting, we're going to be talking about some of the subcommittees, and I am really excited to roll them out. So with that, just as a quick reminder, this meeting is being recorded and this is an open meeting. So, just be mindful and sensitive that anything you say will end up on YouTube so that the general public can see it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne, who's going to facilitate our opening question and round the horn, and we will go from there. But it is great to see everybody, and hopefully soon we can do this in person.
Great. I am so excited to see so many of you. I am going to put our rounds question in the chat. So as a reminder, we're sharing our name, our pronouns, and then the rounds question that we would love to hear thoughts on tonight are, how can government, organizations, or communities begin to address the different layers of race-based trauma? So at our last meeting, Shauna Murray Brown gave us an incredible presentation on historic and race-based trauma. And we want to have just a little space to think about how we can start to address some of that. So we are going to have our breakout rooms, and I am going to open them. I know it's a lot to answer in 30 seconds, but we're really just starting to think about what we can do there. But you will have a facilitator in your room who is going to keep you to those 30 seconds. So just keep that in mind. I'm actually looking to see if I see one of my facilitators. I see Shaquille is in one room, and great, I've got it. And Matt is facilitating a second room, and then I will be in this main room. So I'm gonna go ahead and open all the rooms, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. All right, I think we are mostly to the size. As people join the meeting, as a reminder, they join this room. This is kind of the home base. And so our room may be a little smaller for right now, and hopefully people will be joining as we go. Matt is still here, so I was a little thrown off because he's facilitating another room, but he's not on my list. So I think he really is going to disappear. Anyway, excited to hear from you all tonight. As a reminder, the question that we are answering is, how can government, organizations, or communities begin to address the different layers of race-based trauma? So my name's Ann Coy. My pronouns are she, hers. And I think one of the key things is to listen to those communities and allow them to dictate what some of the response should be. I think oftentimes communities that are marginalized have not been listened to. And so making sure that there's space for those parties in places like this is really important. And I'm just going to move down my list of folks here, and I see Tamar next.
Hi. Can you see me? It's weird. It looks like my camera is black. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Tamar Mendelson. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. Yeah, wow, this is a big question. I guess, but there are a lot of things that should be done. Yeah, I agree with you about, I think the perspectives of community members need to be asked for and listened to in organizations. And there should be probably some real consideration of setting up equity and anti-racism metrics that would hold that organizations can be accountable to sort of make sure that they're not even inadvertently maintaining or enhancing disparities and inequities. Should I tag somebody else?
This group's a little tricky because we all move around a little bit. So
Okay.
I'll just move down,
Okay.
down the list. So thanks, Tamar. Next, I'm going to go to Teresa.
Hey everyone, Teresa Bruce, she, hers, hers. And I think it begins by looking at the policies that are in place, like looking at policies and pointing out the things that already capitalize on or further cause race-based trauma, and then brainstorming around that.
Thank you. All right, next, folks who are just joining, we are sharing our name, our pronoun, and how can government, organizations, or communities begin to address the different layers of race-based trauma. And I will put that in the chat again. Zeke, can I have you go next?
Absolutely. So Zeke Cohen, he, him, his pronouns, and I think that to build off of what Teresa was saying, I think really it starts with acknowledgement and understanding and being clear about the path that got us here. I think that we can't begin to repair or do any serious reparations work without a real accounting for what has been done. And I think that is on all of us, but particularly on white folks to do that work. So I would say just beginning by being really real about the harm that's been done.
Thanks, Zeke. All right, next I've got Janet.
I think Director Abrahams just joined the meeting.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Director Abrahams, I'm going to come back to you. You can. I'm going to go next to Odette. Councilmember Ramos.
Hi, everyone. Sorry to be late, and I have to excuse myself at 6 o'clock because the school system is having their meeting in my district at the same time. So I apologize for that. I think certainly what my colleague said about acknowledging is very important, but also being intentional about the solution, or at least starting with something and doing it right, and being intentional about what that would be. And it's hard to pinpoint something, but I mean, I always talk about housing and community development, but if we can, if government in particular and follow the lead of what communities are already doing, or many communities are already doing, which is to talk about what's happening in their neighborhoods, as well as address and actually invest in areas that need it most. We haven't done that. And so really acknowledging, one or two pieces that either Dr. Brown talks about or that we're talking about here, and then be really intentional about doing it correctly, strategically, and with the voices of those who have been involved or who have been in the communities, maybe those who've had, trauma from the communities.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to come back to Director Abrahams. Are you able to speak now, Director Abrahams?
I'm so sorry. I have been having all kinds of connectivity issues all day, so I apologize. I believe the question is, what should the government do about equity?
Yeah, to address the different layers of race-based trauma.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we have to do first is admit the reality of it and have open, honest conversations about it, and then invest in strategies to ensure that the trauma does not continue. So, I mean, overall, to me, is just pretty much acknowledging that it's there. We're finding, I am seeing that a lot of people are not acknowledging that. And so, and the depth of what it means and how the effects of it. So I think we should do that. And then, of course, invest in strategies.
Thank you. Regina, we're answering the question, how can government, organizations, or communities begin to address the different layers of race-based trauma? Delegate Boyce, are you able to speak? Okay, we may come back to you. Anaya, are you able to answer that question?
Hey guys, I'm Anaya, pronouns are she, her, hers. And honestly, I think that the way to begin to address the different layers is starting like in your backyard. So for me, I think it always starts with like, yourself, because typically, I don't know, just from a personal experience over time, of trying to save the world and ignoring my own like trauma or mental health or whatever, it typically does more harm than good in the long run, because if you're ignoring your own trauma, then you're not really solving the problem of healing the entire city because yourself is included. So I think that starting with yourself, and yeah.
All right, thank you, Anaya. Anika.
Hi everyone. My name is Anika Victor, pronouns she, her, hers. And I think one important part of this is making sure that our leadership and the people that we're hiring in leadership positions and in city government are representing the people that are having this violence and race-based trauma enacted upon them is going to be really important, because if you have a bunch of older white folks trying to solve race-based trauma, it's not necessarily going to, even if it's well-intentioned, it's not going to hit at exactly what needs to be done. And then also addressing policing, I think, is a really important thing for the city, especially. I mean, so much of our race-based trauma is at the hands of police officers and law enforcement. So,
thank you. I do want to recognize Elijah's with us. He's not feeling well. So he had messaged to say, I'm here, I'm listening, but I'm not going to participate in the conversation. And other than that, I think we heard from everyone on the task force. So thank you.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And again, welcome to this edition of the Baltimore City Trauma Informed Care Task Force. Tonight, we have two folks who are going to present about themselves. Erica Bridgeford, unfortunately, could not be with us, but she will be first up next session. So we do have Dr. Stephen Zinn and Dr. David Falconelli. Since I see Stephen Zinn, I'm going to start with you. There's Dr. Falconelli as well. All right, so let's start with Stephen Zinn, and then we will go to Dr. David.
Well, thanks, Zeke, and thank everyone for allowing me to be part of this task force. I'm Steve Zinn, born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, spent most of my life there. Came to Baltimore about 15 years ago to become the chairman of the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and more recently, the director of the University of Maryland Children's Hospital. Rather than spend time telling you a bit about my past and my history, the real reason I would like to be on this task force and why I appreciate being on this task force is that there is a children's hospital in downtown Baltimore, in West Baltimore. It's been there for 75 years. And I have a sense that many of you don't know that it's there. And I would like to use my time to introduce you or reintroduce you to the Children's Hospital. The Children's Hospital has 100 and some physicians, hundreds of nurses, 160 medical students, residents, fellows, and we believe that we are the safety net of the children of Maryland, but particularly Baltimore, and particularly with the experiences and with the politics and that we've all lived through in the past year. There's a sense amongst us that we need to do more, and we definitely care about the children of Baltimore, and we know that all of you do, and I've been impressed with the programs that you've developed. I think there's a way that we can participate, and I'm really here to listen, and I'm really here to ask some questions about what do we need to know so that we can best serve the children of Baltimore, and what are the most pressing issues that the families have, and is there a way that we can somehow collaborate with the incredible programs that so many of you are involved with, be it teaching or counseling, mental health, working on improving housing, nutrition. So I'm hoping that this video that I put together that Anne is going to play for you will give you a sense of who we are, and I'm hoping that during the my tenure on this task force, we can get to know each other, and you can help me understand how we can be more effective in helping the community and the community's needs. So, Anne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
The University of Maryland Children's Hospital is a valuable resource to Baltimore City and the entire Mid-Atlantic region, providing state-of-the-art primary, specialty, and critical care for children from birth to young adulthood. The Children's Hospital is located within the University of Maryland Medical Center at 22 South Green Street in Baltimore. Nationally and internationally recognized pediatricians have been part of the University of Maryland for more than a century. We provide care to children in more than 30 specialties, as well as primary and emergency room care. Today, University of Maryland Children's Hospital has 132 licensed beds and employs more than 150 attending and faculty physicians, as well as 111 residents and fellows. In late 2020 through early 2021, much of which was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, we had more than 3,000 admissions and more than 94,000 outpatient visits. Additionally, we handled more than 15,250 visits to the Pediatric Emergency Department for a range of issues such as acute asthma attack, organ failures and infections, and behavioral and mental health issues. University of Maryland Children's Hospital surgeons performed nearly 900 inpatient surgical cases in addition to their nearly 2,000 operations on an outpatient basis.
We have always recognized that children are more than simply little adults and that they have extraordinary needs as growing kids. We are able to offer the exceptional care we do because our hospital has been designed intentionally for children, and our faculty and staff, including our anesthesiologists, are specially trained in pediatric medicine. They are committed to providing not just leading-edge treatments, but also the compassion and intangible qualities necessary at a children's hospital that guide patients' abilities to heal from the inside out. Driven by a family-centered care philosophy, the pediatric nurses, allied health professionals, technicians, and child life specialists that round out our care team make our children's hospital the warm environment that facilitates hope and healing. The pediatric nurses contribute to the success of the entire University of Maryland Medical Center's efforts to improve patient outcomes. These stellar outcomes have earned the Medical Center the American Nurses Credentialing Center's magnet designation, putting our hospital among an elite 3% of hospitals that have earned this gold standard designation at least 3 times.
The University of Maryland Children's Hospital is a regional referral center for more than 30 different specialties. For pediatric cardiology and heart surgery, the hospital ranks among the top 50 on the U.S. News and World Report's Best Children's Hospital list. The University of Maryland Medical Center for Advanced Fetal Care provides comprehensive heart care even before birth and continuing that care into adulthood. The hospital's Pediatric Hematology Oncology Division combats childhood cancers in conjunction with the University of Maryland Marlene and Stuart Greenebaum Comprehensive Cancer Center and the Children's Oncology Group. In addition to providing world-class cancer care, these physicians also have expertise in sickle cell disease, hemophilia, and other bleeding disorders. The University of Maryland Children's Hospital is also a key provider of primary care throughout the region with a special focus on the communities in West Baltimore. Throughout our partnerships with several Baltimore City schools, we bring preventive care directly to where the kids need it most. Our mobile health units routinely visit schools to treat patients with asthma and allergies, providing students with wellness information and conduct free health screenings. A large focus of the University of Maryland Children's Hospital is critical care. Our all-private room, 19-bed Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, or PICU, facilitates healing from major surgery, respiratory failure, or acute infection. Our Drs. Ruben and Violet Gigi Neonatal Intensive Care Unit is a 52-bed Level 4 facility that cares for premature infants. It is one of only 2 in the state of Maryland. The Pediatric Emergency Room is exclusively dedicated to serving the needs of infants, children, and teenagers. The 16 treatment areas provide a quiet and safe environment. The Pediatric Emergency Team cares for the evaluation and management of more common problems like injuries and infections, and more complex issues such as organ failure and respiratory disease, which may require admission. There is also a private area for pediatric sexual abuse program. The team also provides immediate access to subspecialty consultations as well as pediatric intensive care units. Additionally, there are 2 units for children and adolescents experiencing a behavioral or mental health crisis.
If those children need admission, the Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Inpatient Unit is a 16-bed, state-of-the-art entity designed both architecturally and clinically to deliver trauma-informed care for children 5 through 17 years old. Our team provides treatment to patients who have depression and anxiety, and others who have endured abuse, neglect, violence, school issues, and other traumatic experiences. The unit provides crisis stabilization, recovery, and healing to instill hope that life will get better. Post-discharge, school transition specialists work to connect patients and their families to vital services and peer support. This has proven to reduce readmissions.
Finally, our close relationship to the University of Maryland School of Medicine means that scientific and medical research is also a vital component of our children's hospital. We have a long history of exploring the fundamental nature of conditions that can undermine children's health, from asthma to cancer, HIV to teen violence, and heart conditions to neurological disorders. At the University of Maryland Children's Hospital, we have an acute understanding that our work is about investing in the future. But we also know that what we are doing has the potential to impact the lives of other children, not only in Maryland, but also around the world.
Well, I'm hoping this gives you a flavor of what we do. And in all sincerity, there's a tremendous groundswell of interest in doing more. And we need your help to direct us. We need to understand how we can use our resources more effectively, more efficiently. And I'm hoping that when COVID becomes less of an issue, I can get many of you to come down and meet with our physicians, meet with our nurses, faculty, and really help incorporate us in what you're doing. We can do more than we're currently doing, and we really want to. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, give a big round of virtual applause to Dr. Stephen Zinn. Really glad to have you on the task force, and thanks for your willingness to show up and to learn and to be part of this. We really appreciate it and look forward to coming down and visiting the center as soon as we're all COVID free. All right, with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. David Falconelli.
All right. So it's an honor to be here, as it always is. And there's a lot that I could say about me, and I'm not going to take up too much time. I will try my best. So, Sandman, pull me off if you got to. I've decided that when I ever have the chance to formally introduce myself, these are the first images that I want people to see. So yes, I'm Dr. David Falconelli. Yes, you can find me at Johns Hopkins University, the University of Florida, Woundwork Productions, Discover Me, Recover Me, Maryland Lynching Treatment Reconciliation Commission. I'm everywhere. All right, I'm everywhere. I do a lot. But this is really what matters the most to me. I am Dorley's husband. She deals with me every day. I am Cruz Matisse's father. I am Dr. Mama Deborah's son, Baba Taiwo's son. I'm Mary's brother. I'm an artist, I'm an African drummer, I'm an African storyteller, and yes, I'm a researcher, PhD. That's what makes up the tapestry of my life. And I'm proud to say and happy to say and honored to say that my life is the product of serendipity. And I used to be very ashamed of that because I used to think you had to earn everything, you had to gain everything. You know what I mean? Like, you work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as they say. No, that's not how it works. And many of the things that have made me who I am happen. You can call it God's favor. You can call it the alignment of the universe. You can call it karma. You can call it good fortune. Call it what you want. But it's the moments that really have made me who I am. I like telling stories, as y'all probably know. I'm going to tell y'all a story real quick. There was once an elder woman, and every day, this elder woman would walk through the forest. It was her sanctuary. It was her refuge. It was where she was one with the divine. She would take in the sights, the sounds, the taste, the touch, the smell. of the forest, and she did it every day like clockwork. On this particular pilgrimage, she came across a stone. And as an elder woman, she knew of many stones. So when she saw this one, she knew there was something special about it. So what did she decide to do? She picked up the stone, she put it in her pouch, and she kept walking. As she was continuing on her journey, she came across a young man who was coming in the opposite direction. And as they got closer to each other, the elder woman could see with her own eyes that this young man had been through some things. He looked tired, he looked thirsty, he looked hungry, he looked like he had been in a fight or two. Anything that life was dealing this young man, he was coming up on the losing side every single time. When he finally got to the elder woman, he asked her, he begged her, "Ma'am, do you have anything that I can eat? Do you have anything that I can drink? Can you tend to my wounds? Can you help me?" And it wasn't long until that young man caught gaze of the precious stone that was in the elder woman's pouch. And as soon as he did, he no longer thought about his hunger. He no longer thought about his pain. He no longer thought about his thirst. There was only one thing that he wanted. And so he asked the elder woman, "Ma'am, may I have that stone that's in your pouch?" And without any hesitation, as if she didn't take a single thought, didn't say a word, she took that stone out of her pouch, she gave it to the young man, and she kept walking. So the young man was going in one direction, and the elder woman was going in the opposite direction. That young man did not take his eyes off of that stone. He was thinking to himself, this stone will make sure I'm never hungry again. This stone will make sure I'm never thirsty again. This stone will make sure no one lays a hand on me. This stone will make sure anything that I've ever desired will be given to me. But after a while, he stopped right in his tracks. And it was as if he had taken in the ambiance of the forest for the first time in his journey. And after a while, he turned around and he ran to that elder woman who was still walking. And when he did, this is what he said. "Ma'am, I want to give this stone back to you because I want whatever it is inside of you that allowed you to give me this stone so freely." That is the essence of what I do as a mercenary for change. That is the essence of what Discover Me, Recover Me does as an organization that utilizes storytelling. We want people to be the best version of themselves. And much of what a person needs to be that best version is already inside of them. It's a major step. It's not the only, but it's a major step to recognize the precious stones that exist inside of all of us. Because we are all human, there are existential determinants of health that we all need. I've narrowed it down to 5 just to make it easy. Acknowledgement, appreciation, respect, understanding, and love. If we can do everything in our capacity to make sure the citizens of Baltimore truly feel in their heart that they are acknowledged, appreciated, respected, understood, and loved, in addition to all the structural and systemic and political and legal, so forth, manifestations of the absence of those things, then we'll reduce trauma very, very significantly. And it starts with the story. You have to listen to the story. You have to empower people to tell the story. Within our narratives lies the truth, our truth. And when we collectively are able to express those truths, we get the truth. So that is why I'm here, because trauma in so many ways has deprived people of the power to tell their story. And very quickly, I know I'm over time. Why'd y'all let me preach? I just want to give you a brief intro into Discover Me, Recover Me. So yes, I'm a public health guy. I went to Hopkins, I'm still there, and I did it being my Black self. And these are some of the ways that this Black self is manifested in places like Hopkins, in places like Florida, and all over the place, where they want to know what storytelling is all about. With Discover Me, Recover Me, it's a complement to the trauma recovery process. You need to change how you think, you need to change your behavior, but you have to change how you feel. And a way to do that is with telling your story and realizing that within your story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, there are manifestations of your true nature within. We call them virtues, we call them fruit of the spirit, we call it the Nguzo Saba. It's all the same thing. And that's what we aim to do. Story mapping is just a way to understand what people consider resources. And the way you find out what those resources are, with what? The stories. Everyone is an expert because their lived experience gives them the ability to understand perspective and to understand the world as they see it. And that context is exactly what we need. So really quickly, why does arts and culture work in health? It does, because it's reflective of our human nature. So as much as we want to quantify it, we can't. What we need to do is qualify it. That's what I want to bring, not just in this work, but in my work as a researcher, a practitioner, an advocate, wherever I'm needed. Arts and culture has to be essential to any aspect of health, especially dealing with something like trauma. If you need to email me, email me. If you want to hit me up on IG, hit me up on IG. If you want to go to my website, go to my website. I'm not hard to find. Peace.
Thank you, Dr. David. Please give a big virtual round of applause to the good Dr. David Falconelli. And thank you for the outstanding presentation. Excellent. All right, wonderful. All right, for the next portion of the show, we are going to start to talk about the subcommittees of this task force, which is where I expect a lot of the work that we're gonna do is really gonna get done. So what I'm gonna do is lay out the 6 subcommittee topics. I'm gonna share a little bit about what they are, and I'm gonna offer an example of an activity that they could do and a metric that they could pursue. These subcommittees will consist of us. Everyone will be part of one of them. They're going to meet at the same time, so you can't be in 2, unless you're me, because I'm going to try and jump around a little bit. But you can't be in 2. And the formal meetings are going to happen every other week, Thursdays. So we're going to have one trauma-informed care task force with all of us on a Thursday. And then 2 weeks later, we're going to have a subcommittee meeting on a Thursday. So same 2 meetings a month, but now one is going to be all of us together, and the other is going to be the work happening in subcommittees. These subcommittees come out of a lot of conversations with you all, as well as, frankly, hundreds of conversations, just listening sessions that we did as we were going through this bill process. We did a massive listening tour in libraries, in laundromats, in rec centers, in classrooms, well over 200 sessions in English and Spanish, all over the place in Baltimore. And this is really some of what we heard. So again, I'm going to share with you what the committees are. For those of you who are not great auditory learners who check out when someone's talking for too long, I am going to I wrote all of this up, so I'm going to ask Anne to send it in writing. But what I would love to have happen is I'm going to go through, and then if folks have questions at the end of each subcommittee, if they could just ask them. And then we'll have some additional time at the end for just general questions, or if people want to circle back. All right. So first subcommittee on the table is going to focus on, and if Anne, I'll just put them in the chat, is going to focus on youth programs. So determining supports for young people across Baltimore. This subcommittee will focus on improving the experience young people have growing up in our city. They will identify ways in which our young people are overly exposed to adverse childhood experiences and determine ways that we can mitigate them. This subcommittee will be led and mostly driven by young people with a few adults. I'm looking at you, some of the teachers on it. Staff to this committee is going to be Director Edwards, as well as Kyla Liggett-Creel. So let me give you just a quick example activity. And let me also be really clear. This is not, when I provide these examples, this is not what you have to do. But in one of the conversations I had, folks asked, hey, Zeke, could you provide an example and maybe a metric? So I wanted to do that just so that folks, just to be generative. But again, this is not what you got to do. So one example of what the Youth Programs Committee could do is to map programs that support young people who have experienced trauma and determine ways they could be better aligned, right? We know that Baltimore has an enormous amount of youth serving programs. And one of the great pleasures of getting to work with Director Tisha Edwards is that she is an extremely thoughtful thinker when it comes to how are we aligning efforts? How are we building a shared vocabulary across organizations, schools, nonprofits? And so one thing that this task force could take on is to map programs across the city that support young people and determine whether they're trauma informed or whether they could be. Or one other example of an activity this group could take on is to organize a campaign to ensure that young people have access to mental health care or peer supports. We know that for a number of reasons, a lot of youth in our city don't always get the kind of mental health care that they need. We know that often peer-to-peer support can be very transformative for young people. And so one campaign that we could take on as a subcommittee is to ensure that young people across Baltimore have access to mental health care or peer support. Here's one example of a goal/metric. We will have no young people experiencing homelessness in Baltimore within 5 years. Obviously, that is a lofty goal/metric, but I believe it is accomplishable or doable. So again, it could be a campaign around youth homelessness. It could be a campaign around youth mental health support. It could be mapping, but whatever it is, ultimately, we want our goals and our metrics to be clear, clearly defined, actionable, so that we can measure our progress. All right, so that is the youth programs determining supports for young people across Baltimore to treat trauma. I'm going to pause here for 30 seconds and see if anyone has any questions or thoughts. Okay, hearing and seeing none. Let me just get a head nod if folks are like pondering with it more or less at this point. Okay, all right, good, thank you. I got a thumbs up from Tamar. All right, good. Okay, appreciate y'all. All right, we're gonna keep rocking. Please, again, stop me if you got any thoughts, any questions. Second subcommittee, developing citywide trauma-informed care policies. So one of the things that the legislation that authorized this task force does is call on us as a task force to develop a slate of policies that we will present to the mayor and city council and potentially state legislature as well to dramatically reduce trauma in Baltimore. This committee will research existing policies and determine ways in which our government has at times inflicted trauma, harm, and re-traumatization on our communities, and then work on policies to help people heal and repair. They can engage with researchers, elected officials, advocates, youth, elders, everyday Baltimoreans. Let me give you an example activity. Recognizing the traumatic impact of policies like redlining and our 1910 ordinance that created racial housing segregation, the subcommittee recommends some version of neighborhood reparations through participatory budgeting. So we recognize that, as we've talked about, race-based trauma, historic trauma is embedded in the very DNA of our city. So one recommendation that this task force subcommittee could put out there is some version of reparations with this is my own passion, but a participatory budgeting spin. So neighborhoods determining themselves what they need. Let me give you an example of a metric. We will identify and recommend 3 trauma responsive policies to the mayor and city council. One will be introduced and become law within the first 2 years. So that is the subcommittee that is focused on developing citywide trauma-informed care policies. And again, that is explicitly written into this legislation, is that part of what this task force does is offer policy recommendations for the city to pursue. And since the state just passed a mirror version of this policy, and since we have my dear friend Delegate Boyce on this committee, I would also suggest that we look to state policies, because for better or often for worse, the state determines a lot of what happens in Baltimore. All right, I'm going to pause there for any questions, comments, thoughts, feedback. Okay, hearing and seeing none. I'm hoping this means this is going well, and I will keep it moving. All right, number 3, training, assessment, and evaluation. This also comes directly from the legislation itself. So as you all are probably aware, part of what this bill does is call for all city agencies in Baltimore to receive trauma-informed care training, with the purpose of transforming their practices and their policies to become healing-centered and trauma-responsive. So this subcommittee will support the agency trainings and help identify ways in which our agencies can better serve Baltimore's residents. So far, we have trained all of the city leadership. That includes all of the mayor's cabinet members, as well as my colleagues and President Mosby. And the mayor himself went through the training. As we go agency by agency, though, we will do a much, much deeper dive. The leadership training was really a snippet and a way to get folks thinking about, invested in, aware of what we're doing. But the intent for each city agency is to spend 8 to 10 months embedded in that agency, doing the deep dive, identifying ways in which they can better serve our communities. And what's really dope and exciting about these trainings, and again, I got to thank William Kellebrew, who's here with us today as a great partner in this work, is that it is for Baltimoreans by Baltimoreans. So all of our faculty, if you will, are community-based organizations in our city. Dr. Tara is playing a leading role as well in helping to facilitate some of the trainings, but all of the trainers themselves are Baltimoreans, and many of them from community-based organizations like Holistic Life Foundation, like ACOBEN, Restorative Practices Baltimore, Roberta's House to talk about grief. So this subcommittee will work with our agencies on those trainings. Let me give you an example. They will work with the health department and community-based organizations to shape and deliver trainings that are healing-centered, focused on equity, and delivered by Baltimore's people and organizations. Let me give you a metric and a goal. We will train 600 library staff within year 1 to fully transform practices and culture toward a trauma-responsive care and community safety model. And I will be hot off the press here, not fully public yet, but the first agency that we're going to be going deep in is the Enoch Pratt library system. We feel that libraries have enormous potential to be catalytic spaces of civic engagement, of community. And they're also spaces where we see a lot of trauma, whether it's folks experiencing homelessness, whether it's substance use disorder, whatever the case may be, just young people needing a place to go. Our libraries are it. And so I'm excited, and they're excited to partner on this work. All right, pause there. Any questions about training, assessment, and evaluation? All righty. Gonna keep it moving. All right.
Oh, hold on. There's a question. Oh, so we can hold till later. I just saw a question come up and got real excited that someone had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Lydell, for using the chat and for asking a question. Let me get to, since that is a generalist question, let me get to the end. And then we'll talk about how the subgroups will intersect and collaborate.
Sounds
good. Anybody else? Rock and roll. Okay. All right, number 4, developing trauma responsive practices across medical institutions. We know that Baltimore, and we heard from Mr. Steven Zinn over here, has a plethora of world-renowned hospitals and medical institutions. Some are using a trauma responsive approach while others are not. We know that in some cases, historically, some of our medical systems have actually perpetuated and exacerbated trauma, particularly in communities of color. This subcommittee will focus on connecting Baltimore's medical institutions and making sure they are all providing trauma-informed services. This committee can also coordinate our hospitals and medical centers and community-based health centers to develop a new intervention or a shared intervention, such as shared screening for ACEs. So in California, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris really pioneered this idea of screening for adverse childhood experiences. I think the key to us considering doing some version of it would be to make sure that we're not only screening, but then we're providing wraparound services and support. But again, this subcommittee will work with our hospitals and our medical institutions to develop shared practices and commitments for all of them. Let me give you an example activity, which is the subcommittee will work with the medical institutions to develop a comprehensive plan for how hospitals could screen ACEs. The hospitals will then provide wraparound services for young people who are identified as having a high ACE score. So obviously this would take a significant amount of work, coordination, resources, money, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I believe in our ability to effectively change patterns and practices and to build collaboration. Let me share a metric and a goal. The Baltimore area hospitals will collectively screen 40,000 children in Baltimore within 2 years for ACEs and provide follow-up support. All right. Any questions, comments, thoughts on developing trauma responsive practices across medical institutions? All right, I'm almost done. So when I get done, I want to hear some questions. We manned tonight early, but last one. All right, and this one is a mouthful, and Shauna has told me that I need to, well, we need to come up with a new title, but work with me here. Decolonizing, depathologizing, destigmatizing, and deploying trauma-informed care in communities that have experienced oppression. Again, it's a mouthful. This subcommittee will identify, share, and engage in practices that seek to decolonize mental health support for communities that have experienced oppression. We know that access to mental health care can be prohibitive for some communities due to barriers with documentation costs, stigma, or the ways in which the field has traditionally pathologized communities of color and other communities. This subcommittee will seek to increase access to mental health care and wellness for Black, Brown, immigrant, Indigenous, LGBTQ, and other communities that have traditionally been marginalized in Baltimore. Additionally, this subcommittee will work to inform the learning and practices of other subcommittees by making sure our culture is inclusive, equitable, affirming, and anti-racist and anti-colonial. Example activity: build a program to provide free group mental health care for undocumented minors who have experienced high levels of trauma. That is one activity that this group could undertake. Or offer trauma responsive services throughout a network of barbershops across Baltimore. That is another activity that this subcommittee could theoretically take on. Let me provide one metric for this subcommittee. They will support the mental health needs of 300 undocumented young people within 2 years. And again, these are just examples that after conversations with some of you and with all sorts of other people, I made up. So we don't have to hold ourselves to these examples or metrics, but I just wanted to have some so that we could at least start tearing it apart and thinking about it. So again, last thing I want to say before just opening it up and, tell me what you think, give me your thoughts. Last thing I want to say is for this last committee, one of the things that we hope is that they will help to inform the work of the other committees so that by bringing together hospitals, by bringing together young people, by doing research, that we don't inadvertently re-traumatize or behave in a way that reinforces colonial practices. So that is what this subcommittee will do. So I'm going to take a big pause right there and let folks share thoughts, comments, questions. And I promise you, Lydell, yours will be first. Okay, so to Lydell's question, curious how all subcommittees, thanks, Fariha. Curious how all subcommittees will intersect or collaborate. Great question, Lydell. So the vision here is that we really are working as a, trying to think of a good metaphor, but it's late and I just spoke for a while, so my brain's not working effectively, but like a spoken wheel, is that how people say it? Hub and wheel. That subcommittees are working, but every other week we're getting back together as a task force. And the subcommittees are reading out, sharing what they are doing. So in those groups, in the larger group, we can find out what the Decolonizing group is up to. We can find out what the youth group and the medical group is up to. And we can really share and inform each other, because I think there will be a ton of crossover. I think there will be a lot of hopefully cross-pollination and folks who are on one committee that have some really good thoughts about another one. And my hope for all of this is that it is truly, truly, truly collaborative, and that we are becoming a community of practice and a community of learning and teaching each other. So I think that, again, the hope is that all the groups really intersect, that there is no like, oh, I got to stick to the youth group, I got to stick to the hospitals or medical institutions group, but that really we're learning from each other and building on each other's work and skills. Does that feel right, Lydell?
Yeah, that sounds right. Thank you, man.
Great. Thanks, man. Okay, other thoughts, questions? Anika says, I was wondering the same thing as Lydell. If we want to provide input into multiple subcommittees, will there be space for that? So again, yes. Short answer, yes. However, we went back and forth, Anika, a bunch about I was like, I want to, everyone's going to want to be on everything because, they're going to be cool. And we decided not to do that, to really have one person on each group, one person just choose which one they want to be on, because it just felt like if everybody tries to do everything, we'll get lost in the sauce and it'll be too much. And we really want to both develop culture and community within the subgroups, but also have space collectively to listen and hear from each other. So it's kind of a yes and question, which is yes, the sincere, true hope is that you can provide input into multiple subcommittees, but you can only be on one because we don't want it to become disorganized and messy and people jumping around. And just for the sake of continuity, we've all been on groups where everybody's into it for a minute, but then they're not. So then they're in another group. We really don't want to do that. We want all of these to be extremely strong. So yes, and. Teresa, so great question, Teresa Bruce. Ms. Bruce asks, what is the number of people that each committee is limited to? Great question. So a couple of things there, two things. One is that people who are not on the task force can be on a subcommittee. There were a lot of people that applied to be on this trauma-informed care task force, and for one reason or another, we were not able to offer them a spot. But we did want to make sure that we doubled back and offered people an opportunity to serve, because that's what this is about, and no one should feel excluded. And so if there are folks that you feel Brendan knows some other teacher within his school that would be amazing on this youth group, Brendan should feel free to have that person get in touch. There would be some kind of process to bring them on, but way more minimal compared to what you guys had to go through. They're not going to have to go through confirmation. They're not going to have to raise their right hand and get sworn in by the mayor. So the short answer is yes. And we want folks to be able to come on that are not necessarily on the task force. And the specific question that Teresa asked that I didn't actually answer is how many people on each. So my hope is that a minimum of 5 plus staff. There are 38 of us total on this task force. So if there are 6 groups, then I hope we can have 5 in each, adding a few more folks from people who want to participate that are not formally on the task force. My hope is that no group gets bigger than 12. I feel like once you get past that, you start to get slightly unwieldy. So I would say I'm hoping that we end up in the 5 to 12 range. Corey asks, do you have any suggestions on who joins what group? Yeah, so I do. I don't want to start naming names and be like, yo, you should go over here, you should go over there, please go over there. I got thoughts. I know most of you pretty well at this point. Some of you I don't know as well, but also want, voice and choice is a big part of becoming trauma informed. So I don't want to you got to go in this spot. So I'd be happy to follow up with you, Corey, afterward. If you feel like I'm just not sure, I don't know where I want to go, and I can give you my thoughts, but ultimately at the end of the day, want you to choose. Also with that, Anne is going to put, I think, in the chat, a form by which folks can select the committees on which they want to, the committee on which they want to serve. We're going to have folks rank them. My one concern was all right, what if all 38 people want to be on the youth committee? or some other committee. We don't want it to get like that and then have like no one on the hospital committee. Although I know Stephen Zinn is going to be there, so go check it out. We didn't want to have a situation where it's like 2 weighted to 1. So you may not get your first choice, but you will definitely get one of your top 3 choice. So if you check out the handy dandy form that Ann Coy just put in the chat, it has 3 choices. You got to put in, please don't forget to put your name, your email, and blah, blah, blah. But you can rank which ones you want to be on, your first, your second, and your third. And we will all but promise that you will get one of your top 3, unless something really weird happens and every single person names the same top 3. Okay. Other,
I have a question.
Dr. Gavin.
So this isn't about the subcommittees, but also in general. Is there a way that we're going to either catalog or compile all the work that we're doing if people are working on gathering resources or find documents that are relevant to what we're doing? Do we have some kind of shared, I don't know, cloud or drive or something where, because sometimes like I have things from our hospital I want to share with the group about what we're doing or things that we find relevant in the community. Is there some way we can share with each other and keep track of what we're finding?
Yeah, that's a great idea and thought, Dr. Lindsay. I would say the answer is yes. I'm not smart enough to figure out what that is. Like I get lost in the sauce on like, is it a WhatsApp? Is it a Google Doc? Is it a, and there was another one that Shauna had suggested. I can't even remember what the thing was, but it was some like less evil than Facebook WhatsApp type thing that organizes people into chats. But I would say, Lindsay, if you have a preferred system, if there's like Google Doc or whatever that you think, and again, Ann is like way more organized than I am. If you got some thoughts on that, would love for you to design it. Because again, I think the answer is yes, we absolutely want to compile and catalog and document resources so that we're both like sharing them internally with the task force and also providing external communication as well. So the answer is yes, would love to have you help us figure out what that looks like.
Sure, thank you.
Awesome.
So Zeke, I got a question. Going to back to one of the different groups. So 1 second. Developing trauma responsive practices across medical institutions. Does that also include health institutions? And yes, there is a difference.
So as in like public health institutions, or like give me some flavor on what you're thinking about. You're muted.
So the health department, that's public health. So I'm thinking about my background at Hopkins. That's a public health institution, certainly informs a lot of public health in Baltimore and beyond. So if we're looking to address trauma-informed care or just even the paradigms of dealing with trauma, yes, medical institutions makes all the sense in the world. Public health needs to be right there too.
Yeah, I think that's right, David.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we yes. You know, we know we have Bloomberg, we know we have Morgan State, we know we have a number of great public health institutions. The health department is very, very, very much committed, implicated, part of this work. So I would say the answer is yes. What it looks like in terms of like how to effectively deploy services, I don't know yet, but I think the answer is the public health institutions should be part of this work as well and have a lot to offer and a lot to, you know, help contribute to.
Yeah, that was part of my question as well. I see that, you know, I see the importance of practice, of course, but even just the frameworks that institutions use when they teach about trauma, when they research trauma, I think there can be a lot that we as this task force can inform for that as well. I would love to hear from Tamara as well, because I really want to, you know, anytime I hear about the medical space, I always think about the public health space hand in hand. And even though it may not manifest the same, I think there should be the same sense of urgency with how trauma is reimagined within that space as much as it is in the medical space.
Dr. Tamar, you want to jump on that comment?
Well, I guess one question that came up for me, we were talking, David, is like if I think about Hopkins or a public health, like education institution, versus either the health department or a medical institution where there's direct like client service. The trauma responsive work feels a little different in terms of like how to be trauma responsive when serving clients versus more like how does like I think I could see a ton of work being done on how Hopkins might conceptualize and work with being trauma responsive in the way that it's organized and handles a lot of things within its teaching, but it feels a little different from sort of client facing. So I don't know if, tell me more about what you're thinking with the sort of educational institutions.
So I would say from the way I'm thinking is how people, regardless of where they are taught about trauma and what it looks like and how it's even, again, conceptualized. So I'm trying not to be too like high in the sky right now. But even thinking about the pandemic, is like, I really think that this has been a lot of people's first introduction to public health. They've never thought about public health before COVID-19. So yeah, obviously not the best example to use, but public health nonetheless. So I wonder when we talk about trauma, well, how do people frame trauma? And it's not to define it for them, but I think as a part of this process, we're going to discover a lot, particularly within the cultural context, when we think about racial context, when we think about all these different ways that not only trauma manifests, but how people even perceive it. Certainly it should inform our practices, but I think it should certainly inform our education as well. And again, that can be didactic teaching, that can be, again, the way that research is conducted, that can be the way that policy is informed. So it certainly has a lot of ramifications, and for me, it's about the leverage. We know that our institution, Hopkins, carries a lot of leverage. Morgan State, same thing, carries a lot of leverage. So they should be some of the immediate recipients, almost on a, if we're thinking, hierarchical, for lack of a better concept right now, because it is late. They need to know this too, so that can be disseminated to the future students and the future practitioners and the future researchers and the future administrators.
I agree with you. I agree with David. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And my apologies, y'all. I omitted one of the subcategories. I was moving too quick. One, and it's somewhat relevant to this, but I do not think that it mitigates from anything you just said, Dr. David Falconelli. I still think the public health institutions should also be part of the sort of medical intervention. But one subcommittee that I did not mention, apologies, is research and best practices in Baltimore and across the country. As the first city to legislate trauma-informed care, it's important that we utilize research data and best practices to inform the implementation of the Healing City Act. Several states, including most recently Maryland, thank you, Delegate Boyce, and others, have adopted a trauma-responsive approach to governance, and many cities have embedded some version of trauma-informed care. We should learn from others while also identifying, mapping, and connecting what is already happening in Baltimore. This subcommittee will contribute to our overall understanding of the current field and help us develop vocabulary and skills. Example activity, create a report that documents successes, challenges, and lessons learned from California, Oregon, Washington, any of the places. What can Baltimore learn from these trauma-informed states? Or mapping existing providers that utilize trauma-informed care in Baltimore, determine gaps in service and recommend improvements. One metric or a goal could be within a year, produce a report that documents hospitals, nonprofits, and businesses that utilize trauma-informed services and make recommendations for how they can be expanded and streamlined. So again, we do want to have a whole subcommittee that is focused on the research. I think it's really important, again, as a committee, as a task force, as practitioners, that we be data informed, that we be paying attention to what folks have already done and are currently doing, and not just like be reinventing the wheel. So that is one as well, and it is on the form. Sorry for omitting it.
So in terms of research, it sounds like research shows up a little in two places. One is like the evaluating trainings, and one is more like the lay of the land in terms of best practices in the city.
Yeah, I think that's right, Tamar. I think there's definitely some overlap within. Yeah, I mean, part of what we want to do with the trainings and the transformation within city agencies is evaluate them and have report and all the rest. Now, we do have an evaluator who is being paid to do an evaluation, but there is absolutely a case to be made that members of this task force could and should contribute to that evaluation and pay attention to what's happening within that space. So I would say that, yes, I think research shows up, evaluation shows up both in the subcommittee that's explicitly focused on research and in the one that's focused on figuring out how do we do these trainings and then how do we learn from them? Because that's going to be important. Is like, once we do the first one, that's our pilot. We get the libraries. What do we learn from the libraries? Where were the mistakes? Where were the gaps? What could we have done differently or better as we move on to the next one? So I think absolutely critical that some of the folks who have a lens toward research be engaged in that committee, but also some of the folks who have a lens towards research and who like to read, study, write, be in the research committee, because we really want to know, like, what are we doing and what are the other places that are engaging in this work doing?
So with the medical institutions one, so is that any institution focused on providing clinical care, like direct care to patients? So does that include mental health agencies? Other agencies are not necessarily focused on physical health, but just broader than that as well?
Yes, that definitely include, like, even community-based health centers. I would include in this category. I just think, like, we can't leave on the table the fact that Baltimore is a huge eds and meds town, and we have many amazing medical institutions. And as a comma in the same sentence, many of those same medical institutions have perpetrated and perpetuated some of the worst forms of trauma onto communities, particularly communities of color. So I think it is incumbent, and especially with a group like this one, where we've got psychologists and we've got doctors and we've got all sorts of different medical public health practitioners, I think there is an absolute unmissable opportunity for us to have linkages between the medical centers, the health-based community suites, the hospitals, and so on and so forth. And Mount Washington is definitely among them. Okay. Hearing and seeing, oh, Dr. Daniels, my God. Would also be great under research to look at ways to publish for those that feel professionally inclined. Absolutely. Would love to see that subcommittee of the task force produce a report, write a paper. Again, I think there's just a lot of opportunity, given that we're the first city to be doing this, for us to be engaged in research in a really, really, really serious, academically rigorous way. And so absolutely great point, Dr. Daniels, that we should, if there is a world in which, folks are wanted to do that, we should be considering publishing something out of that subcommittee. All right, anybody else? Mr. Parsons, I see you with the pencil, but.
Oh, I asked a question in the chat a little bit earlier just about anticipated timelines. Do we have a sense of when activities and outcomes need to be developed, or is it going to be different depending on the different committees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think it's going to be different based on the different committees. Like, I really think that it's going to be up to the committee members themselves to determine what the outcomes look like. I think so I have like two competing thoughts. One is that I think we want to show some proof of concept and have some early quick wins, because I think that, again, folks are hungry to see this task force really taking action and creating change within our city. Simultaneously, and I hold these thoughts in tension, I think that we need to be focused on longer term structural deep work, because ultimately, to me, that's what changes Baltimore. It's not like the quick thing. It's like, how do we really make impact over the long term? And so I think part of the dexterity or like skill that it's going to take is doing both, like both being able to identify things that we can accomplish in a fairly short timeline, and at the same time having a vision and eyes toward the larger toward the larger toward our larger goals. Anaya asks, what would you define as quick, easy wins? So off the top, I think that developing a peer-to-peer support system that incorporates what already exists within Baltimore is something that we could do in a reasonable amount of time. Just again, off the top example, having not done enough thinking about it, like that there are already institutions and organizations that do peer-to-peer support. And so connecting, strengthening, deepening those could be something that I think the youth committee, Anaya, could accomplish relatively quickly. That's one example. I think on the research front, having a having a 1-year report on what we've been able to accomplish, which, by the way, is mandated in the legislation, is that we've got to report out to the city council, is something that, again, not going to take a super long amount of time, and will demonstrate progress and momentum for what we've been up to. All right, anybody else? All right, great. So we are 7 minutes early, which is good. Really appreciate all of the super thoughtful questions that folks have been asking. Truly excited about embarking upon this work. Anne has twice now put the link in the chat. I'm going to send to Anne just the basic spiel that I gave to you all. Feel free to read back on it, especially for the folks that were not. I think I know that at least 2 of the folks that were not able to join us tonight had told me that they were going to watch the YouTube, but we'll also send it out to them as well. Would ask that folks get your recommendations in ideally within the next 7 days. That way we have some time to start like planning it out and mapping it out. If you're super ambivalent, that's fine. I heard Corey and Lydell asked for some thought partnership on where they want to go. Happy to do that with you both, and then anyone else who's like, where do I belong in all this? Just let me know. Like I said, each of the committees will be staffed by either myself, Director Edwards, and our friends from the health department, or one of Director Edwards' staff. But again, really excited for this. And what did I miss?
I think you hit it, Zeke. I'm going to send around, I'll send a link to the recording, I'll send a link to the form, and I'll send minutes from the meeting. So you should have everything you need in your inbox tomorrow.
All right. For the first time in the history of the Trauma Informed Care Task Force, we are 5 minutes early, which should make up for me going 5 minutes late the last couple of times. So you're welcome for that. Real quick. So come next week, we got Erica is in the hopper. And I need 2 more people to present on themselves. 2 people who have not yet gone. I'm seeing Lydell, appreciate you. And I need 1 more. Got Anaya. All right, I got Lydell, got Anaya, 2 of our amazing youth members of the Trauma Informed Care Task Force. Excited to hear what you all have to say next in 2 weeks. And what's the date for the next one?
June 3rd.
June 3rd. So I will see you all back on Zoom. And like I said, spend some time thinking about which one you want to do. And we'll, you know, if you need any help with that, just let me know. All right. All right. Teresa beat y'all to it. She already voted. That's what's up.
Great. Night, everybody.
All right. Good night.